So these are the methods how it has been made. However, I do not restrict my study towards only artifact. An artifact is a result of human interference and the technological innovation that has been done by a group of people. It did not develop in one day. It has been a trial and error process which has been perfected and given to us. Now, when I'm saying it's a human interference, how it is becoming human interference, a craftsman, if today I think that I will make an arrowhead, I have to prepare a blueprint. I have to acquire the resources. I need to find the resources. So then I have to give it a shape, design, all these formulations, and then this cognitive behavior that is going on behind the making of an individual product is very important that we study those things as well. And that can be done by ethnography. And then comes the concept of technology is very different. I think you have gone ahead actually. No, you're going ahead. Go back. No, next. So, concept of technology is very different to like for we archaeologists, if we find an object, for example, the famous dancing girl, we will see its composition, we will see its context. But for an art historian, it will mean different. How she is standing, what are the ornaments she is wearing. So the interpretations are different, of different interest. This is not clash of interest. It is our perspective towards the discipline and how it varies from one discipline to another. And the relationship between technology and human are always complex, because I always believe a technology cannot survive if it is not socially accepted. Means the people of that society have to accept the technology, without which it's very difficult to survive. For example, if you are given in the 90s, computer, mobiles, these were very rare. And some people rejected the acceptance of these things. But today, if we see, we are all using this. So because we have accepted the technology, that's why it is being advanced, right? So it is always important, and we always look technology as a very simplified manner. Now, how this technology are being instrumentalized are also very important. And again, with the space and technology, I have already given an example of Swami Malai, which gives us a concept that how technology is associated with the space. Next, please. Now, in Harappan context, now yesterday someone was asking about copper and iron. So, in Harappan context, we see the development of the copper technology from the use of native copper, which is naturally available. And then what we see that is shaped and hammered. And because copper is a soft metal, it can be easily made given a shape. The next stage in this process is called annealing. Since copper is a soft metal, it is also brittle in nature. Now, because it is brittle, if I hammer continuously, the product will break. So, if I provide heat and again hammer when it is red hot, due to thermochemical changes, that dynamics, it won't break. So this was the next stage, and then comes the stage of smelting. Now, smelting also has stages of development. The first is the oxides and carbonates, which are easier to smelt in comparison with sulfide ores. So why sulfide ores are difficult? Because we have to imagine, we have to understand the technological time that we are talking about. They doesn't have blast furnace. They doesn't have machine bellows to raise the temperature to higher level. But what they were using, like if anyone remember, yesterday Dr. Uday was talking about the furnaces that have been found. There were 2 holes he mentioned where bellows were attached. So they were using leather bellows, so to provide the air. So now when we use bellow, it's a continuous operation goes on for at least 12 to 14 hours. So maintain the temperature. If your speed in your hand is reduced, then the temperature will come down. So to maintain that with the sulfide is very difficult. So what is done? It is converted into oxide by roasting. Then it becomes easier, and it can be done because I myself have done it and I was very successful in that. So then we have this melting and casting, which is also crucible smelting. And this sulfide ores, as I say, there are a process of receiving the ingot. Next please. Next. So now coming to the question of lost wax. Now it is applicable worldwide because of its flexibility and its intricate designs. Now, but it is a multi-step process, and in our Indian subcontinent, that is the undivided Indian subcontinent, we had Harappans were the pioneer in that, and then it was followed by, we see many other cultures where this Gupta, we see in Guptas, Cholas and all other culture, this lost wax casting technique is there. Now with Harappan culture, Egyptian culture, in Egyptian civilizations also we see this lost wax technique. The only difference between Harappan and Egyptian was in Harappa we use, even today the lost wax casting are done by direct investment casting, and in Egyptian it was indirect method. So what is direct and indirect? Direct, one mold for one object. In indirect you can make multiple. So that is the only difference. And next please. So what is this lost wax? When we make a wax model, then when we cover it with a mold. Now when we heat this mold, the wax melts out and it creates a hollow cavity, which is actually the negative impression. So, and then when we pour the molten metal there, it takes the shape of the wax. Since the wax is lost, L. Behand in 1980 was the first person to call this as the lost wax technique. In French, it's called cire pardieu. In Sanskrit, also we have reference to lost wax technique. It's called Madhuchishta Vidhanam. And this is the process of lost wax technique, which I will be showing with examples later on. Now next please. Yeah, so these are the processes, how they are done. So next please. So next we are talking about lost wax casting, and also where does this lie? So the first is, I have to extract the ore. I have to make it ingot. Then only I can cast it. So the first comes the smelting. Now when we are talking about smelting, we categorized into primary and secondary smelting. So primary smelting is extracting the ore and getting into the ingot. Then we have the secondary smelting, that is the casting process. So if you see here, these are the ores for the experimentation that I mentioned. These ores were collected from the Khetri mines. The chunk of ores were collected. These were powdered with the help of bellow, leather bellow I was referring. So this is the leather bellow. Alright, we'll keep it. Next please. Yes. So we are talking about ethnography, ethnoarchaeology. Now, when we are talking about ethnography and ethnoarchaeology, one, we have to remember there is a very blurred line between the both. Ethnography is not the direct link of the past and the present. However, we try to understand the past, we are the product of the present. So when we are talking about present, what we assume is usual may not have happened in the past. So what we try to do with ethnography is to understand the process that this may have been possible, but it's not exact replica of the past, what we are trying to do. And so therefore, and we cannot draw inferences in isolated community or in restricted. What I mean by that is generally when we do ethnography, we choose a study area, for example, the site of Rakhigari. From Rakhigari, we take the in and around of the region and try to see what the metalsmiths are doing that side. But when we do that, there is one process that we are seeing the continuity maybe of the technology, and another process that the technological similarity and dissimilarity cannot be traced from one region itself. Therefore, and technology cannot be studied through chronocultural geographic boundaries. Therefore, what I try to do is to understand the technological affinities based only on technology, not on geological or political boundaries. I will be giving you examples from this. And technological feature in community level may or may not change. I don't know if anyone heard about the name of Dokra here. Yes? So the Dokra brasswares, initially they were using bronze as their raw material. Due to the scarcity of the raw material, they have shifted now to brass. So this is not a complete change of technology, but a raw material change may also occur over the span of time. Also, as I given you an example, again this spatial and the continuation, even within one culture, for example, Dokra, we see a sharp different regional variations within the Bastar Dokra and the Dokras of the West Bengal. So these regional variations, they are following the same technology, but there are variations. So these are also equally important to take into account when we are talking about technology. And of course, we have to understand this changing pattern of their behavior, which depends on various factors: environment, availability of resources, cost of production. All these things we have to take into account. Next, please. Next, please. So what we see in lost wax casting, we see two kinds. One is solid casting and another is hollow casting. Now in Harappan culture, we see solid casting, and the similar kind of casting pattern we also see in the south. Here I have taken the case study of Manar. It's in Kerala. Now in hollow casting, we see Dokra. Next, please. In Harappan context, these are the different kinds of castings that we have seen. Next, please. Yes, now it's a very important thing, artifact as an historical identity. Now, yesterday we were telling there are two pieces of the so-called dancing girl. Now, this is national treasure. This has become our identity, and when India and Pakistan was partitioned into 1947, there was a strong debate between Indian government and the Pakistan government, where Pakistan government do not want to keep this object simply because of its nudity. And they want India to take both the objects. But at present situation, they want it back from India as well. So how an object becomes a national identity is very important to understand. Also, when we are talking, the context varies from one discipline to another, and this I have given the example already. Now, how we identify an artifact is largely dependent on its context. Now, the context can be interpreted by different archaeologists in different manners. I will give an example of that. But before that, let me talk about artifact association and disassociation. Like what I am associating with a particular artifact, what I am looking into the object is very much depend not only on the context, not only on the archaeological material, it's my view on the object as well. Next, please. Yes, this is the famous quote by John Marshall, where I will draw your attention to certain points where he is calling the object as negroid facial features executed with some primitive vigor. So this is his description, how he is calling that it has a negroid feature and it has been done with very rough craftsmanship. Again, next please. Again he is talking rough craftsmanship with disproportionately long arms and legs. Young aboriginal Noj girl, that's why we call it so-called dancing girl, as she beats time to the music with her feet. Now here John Marshall is saying two things. One, he is associating with a negroid feature, rough craftsmanship. Again, he appreciated the object by saying despite obvious defects, shows sound observation on the part of the artist. So this is how we look into the object differs. At one point of time, we may be pointing out the crudeness of the object. According to us, what it seems to be crudeness. Maybe for the craftsman or the artist, it may not seem as crude. But again, we are saying, appreciating the work that has been done. Next, please. Again, Mortimer Wheeler, he is saying, Baluchi style face with pouting lips and insolent look in her eyes. A girl perfectly for the moment, perfectly confident of herself and the world. So how an object is being perceived by different archaeologists is also very important. Next, please. So now let's talk about the solid casting. Now the problem when we are talking about Harappan culture, as I mentioned that with metal, we do not see the entire technological process. We have text regarding lost glass technique, but this is much later period. As you know, Manasallasa, Shilparatna, Manasara and all they have. But how to see with ethnographic aid, we can look into it, and I have chosen the site of Manar in Kerala for this particular purpose where solid casting are done. Now this is known as bell metal town of Kerala, and they use brass, bronze and silver work. Now in this workshops, women are not allowed. They are all Vishwakarmas. I think almost all of you are familiar with this. So they are all Vishwakarmas, and within this workshop or any part of this work, women cannot be associated with. Then next please. This is the wax model. So this is the wax model, and this is a mold where you can see the wax. So this is a wax model, how it has been done, and then this is a mold. Here you can see the wax inside. So let it be with me. This is the first step. Then next please. So next step is the clay molding, means we need to make clay. So the major difference between solid and hollow casting is that for solid casting there will be wax which will be covered with clay, that is called mold. It's simple. Now with hollow casting we have wax, then will be one layer of clay which is called clay modeling, and then it will be covered with multiple layers of clay which is called mold. This is the with core, what we call it, solid casting no core, and hollow casting we have core. That's it. So now this particular region do not get finer quality of clay. So in order to make it fine, this person is grinding it to the fine paste which will be used. Now for molding, there are multiple layers are used, and minimum it's 3 layers of clay which are used. The first layer of the clay has to be always the fine one, because if you remember, the wax model which contains all the designs has to be imprinted in the clay. So the fine the clay will be, the finer the design will be. So the first layer is always the fine clay. Then we have the medium clay which will, and the final layer will always be rough so that it can retain, it don't break, it can retain the heat. So here you can see this has been, if you see this and that, you can understand the difference. Next please. So here what we see, regional variation I was talking about within one technology. It's very interesting find. This is from Mahabalipuram. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware with the situation. In Mahabalipuram, we have lot of craft activities that's going on, but all these crafts have been pushed towards the interior because of environmental pollution, because of other reasons. Now what happens, they doesn't get good quality of clay supply, and that is a problem. So they have came up with a modern idea of POP, plaster of Paris. Now this is also helpful. I'm not saying it's very helpful for the artisan, but if we look very precisely, we will see the intricacy that we can see in clay we do not see. This object, if you can see the top one, that was of clay mold, and this one is of POP. This one is more cruder, because what happens when you pour the hot molten metal into clay, it will take time in settling. But in POP, the process is much faster. So when it is much faster, it will also give you the result like this. Yes, yes. Next, please. This is a nightmare for the archaeologist. So the molds that are broken, finally, what they do, they don't throw it away. They make it, grind it into this finer powder and recycle it. If they are making large sculptures, they use it for sticking it to hold the clay. Now this can be only found out through ethnography. Without that we can't. We always say that we do not find mold in archaeological context. We have very few examples. So probably the Harappan art craftsmen also were doing this, but I can't say that they were doing it because I have no evidence for it. So that's why we always say that recycling is good for craftsmen, but it's a nightmare for the archaeologist. Next, please. Next is the dewaxing. Now, why dewaxing? Because the wax has to be melted out. That is called dewaxing. Now, if I am making large sculptures, I need to do dewaxing separately. But if I'm making very tiny, small images, then I don't need to do dewaxing separately. I will give you an example later. So, no, please don't change. So, this is, you can see, the molds. This are the molds which are fitted and it will be heated, and they will use coconut shell for heating. And separately, metal will be heated in a different furnace, and this is almost the standard process in southern part of India that we see in all workshops, that metal is heated in a different furnace and molds are heated in a different furnace. Because both requires different temperature, different time. Next, please. So this is a crucible, modern crucible, and filled with scrap. And then what they do? They cover it with clay fully. It will be covered. So if you can see, they leave behind 2 holes. Can anyone tell me why it is done? Yes. It's not for tapping. Tapping will be afterwards. But when there are 2 reasons. One is to escape the gases. Also, the craftsman will identify whether the metal has melted properly or not through this. How it is so? If the metal has melted completely, the color will change. So this is the artisan's finding. Next, please. Okay, so this is a process. The second photo, you can see that the craftsman is putting some rag in the mouth of the crucible. This is a process called settling. Now, why it is, I will explain later. First, let me finish with this, then I will explain the science behind it. And this, because he is putting rag, this flame is coming out. And you can see how he is tapping. So this is how the molds are placed in a position so that it won't be disturbed at all. They bury it underground so it won't be disturbed at all. Next, please. Yes, then the molds are broken and the cast is released. Next, please. This is the final stage of polishing. This is the furnace. Next, please. So this is the furnace I was saying. You can see how the furnace has been made. It's not just brick furnace. You can see there is an inner chamber. That inner chamber where the crucible will be fit. It will be fit so that the crucible won't fall or anything. But in the bigger part of the furnace that you can see, their ashes will be collected. So that every time the craftsman doesn't have to, it won't get choked, it doesn't have to do. There will be depth of the furnace. Next, please. Now, let's see about dokra. This was the solid casting. Now, let's move to the hollow casting. Now, when we are talking about dokra, let me give a brief introduction of dokra. They are known as by various names, Malhar, Muls, and they are said to have migrated from the Madhya Pradesh to various regions like Orissa, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh and many other places because of the scarcity of the raw material. Now, I am talking only about West Bengal, not in any other areas where I have done my field. So, now the root of migration is difficult to trace, and we know that at some point of time of the Pala age in Bengal, they were settling there. And when it comes to the record written history, we have the colonial work. Prior to that, we don't find any evidence of any written records about the Dokras. So we mainly depend on those colonial work where they have of course been shown as a tribal and all. Now, so there is a folklore related that the Raja had once has seen the necklace, and he was very impressed by the work, because Dokra actually means ghalna, means melting of the wax. And seeing this, Raja was impressed and gave patronage to them, and that's how they started their work there. Next, please. Yes. Now, this is very important thing, when we talking about the Dokra or many other folk art, what we call it, we always confuse between two things. One is oral tradition and another is oral history. There is a difference between two. Oral traditions are the one that is continuing from the past till today, and probably at the later stage it is being documented or written down. But the oral history are always a product of the present, contemporary, of a single lifetime. So this comes under oral tradition and not oral sources, oral history. Next, please. So the question comes, which method is better, solid or hollow? Now, both are better. Why we see these two methods? Because it depends on economic condition, necessity, and many other factors. The first thing, when we are doing solid casting, since it's only wax and mold, you need to put a thick layer of metal. And as I said, this Dokra people has already faced scarcity of metals. And in hollow casting, you don't need to do, because you have the support. Therefore, both the methods are good. They will produce very intricate results, but it depends on the economic status. Bastar, they are originally from Bastar, Madhya Pradesh, but they are found in various places. Oh, I have.
We have to
Okay. Okay. Give me 15 minutes, because the most interesting part are remaining. So the clay, they have migrated to West Bengal, Orissa, and many other places. So this is the wax model. I will run fast. Next, please. Yeah. So this is the clay core, as I was saying. Next, please. Wax. Next, please. This is another regional variation, use of tar mixed with mustard oil. West Bengal mustard oil is easily available, tar is available, but in South India we see use of coconut oil. Okay, next please. Okay, this is again molding. As I said, the same method of molding. This is, as I said, for smaller objects, we don't need to do. No, go back. Go back. Wait, next. Okay, one thing, just go back. See the designs that has been made here, because this will come in the wax ultimately. So the finest of the finest has to be made here. Next, please. Yes, the molding I say. Next, please. Yes, so for the smaller objects, we do not need to do dewaxing separately. In the mold itself, we put the brass and salt. I hope you know why salt is used. So then we cover it up. Next, please. Then after the casting, we break it. Next. This is the final polishing. Next, please. Now, I was talking about archaeology, what we see from the material culture, what we can understand from the ethnography. Now, it's the science behind that, what we cannot see. But by no means we should think that the craftsmen are not aware of this. Why? The examples I will be giving. So the first is the metal loss. Any metal that is charged or that is melted, put into the crucible, will suffer from a loss. Why? Because it has non-metallic inclusions, which means it has silica in it, impurities, what we call it, right? Then there is a process of oxidation, evaporation, and all this process will cause the metal loss. Next, please. Yes, why need to purify? Because again, as I said, the metal is contaminated. And remember where I was showing the craftsmen were putting rag into the crucible. So that is, once the metal is heated in a crucible, it will be kept aside for 2 to 3 minutes, so that the metal will settle down and that this non-metallic inclusions will flow up, because those are light in nature and metal is heavy. And that rag is to clear the mouth of those non-metallic inclusions which has come up. So this is, the process is called settling. Next, please. Now, casting, I was saying that we pour the metal, but it doesn't cool down. So the craftsman will keep at least overnight in order to cool down. But this process of cooling happens in different stages. So first, it has to go the top surface where it is poured, and the walls of the molds cool down faster than the other places. Next, please. Yes. So this is actually from the transformation of liquid to solid state. And when we see different kind of crystallization. Now, this is crystallization, grains, boundaries, all these things we can understand when we do microstructure studies. This comes up, all these features have poured. Suppose I am pouring the metal, there is some gap or there is some pores in it. So those will come up into our microstructure studies. Next, please. Yes, so we have this, now crystal will depend on the different process of cooling rate, and I.B. Kumanin has classified into 5 stages. First, the one when we are pouring the metal, then the stage 2 is heat transfer from molten metal to mold, and next please. The heat transfer will be central zone. When central zone, it cools down sharply, that is the 3rd stage, and when it will reach the center of the cast mold, stage 3 will end, and it will start with the process of new one, that is the all central metal begins at temperature of molten metal in all zones, including central portions drop down. That means there will be no difference between solid and liquid state. It will come to one homogeneous state. And stage 5 is the final. So the structures that they are taking, what is happening inside the mold, the grains, boundaries, dendrites, whatever we are seeing in the microscope, the final structure is coming, that is the last stage. Next. So I have already said, and this I have already explained. Next, please. Yes, so this is on the surface of the castings, we find the highest density and best mechanical properties. Next, please. Yes. Now, I have talked about the difference between solid and liquid casting. Now, what are the similarities? So why I have put these photos, look at the bangles, ma'am was asking. So you see, this pattern, if you see, it's coiling method. You just coil, take the tar, because if it is little hot, it will be more elastic, and then you wrap around. These bangles were made also by the same design. You have to coiling method. So we see some different similarities, but that doesn't mean I'm saying that Dokras are continuing Harappan tradition. No, they have their own indigenous development. But as I said, that technology should not be limited to certain area of studies, and this is one such example where we can see the similarities. Next, please. This is my last slide. I don't put conclusion because I believe that today's conclusion can be tomorrow's best. New discovery can change it completely. So this is my last slide, and here I want to mention and address very important. When we think of technology, we always think about the West. They are the pioneers of technology. But, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of investment casting. Yeah. So investment casting is what? Simple, the similar process. But the term investment casting was popularized during the British Second World War, where Britishers need to make heavy munitions and faster production. So, but from that time, we see the use of word of investment casting. Now, at present, we see two kinds of presence: this traditional method of lost wax and the modern method, which are done in the factories. What they do, they follow the same process. Only the molds are made of ceramic or aluminium, which makes it easy. You make multiple objects from the same mold, and it is more faster. With clay, it has to dry. With wax, you have to heat, and you can only work with wax when it's hot. Otherwise, you cannot. And with clay, you have to put multiple layers. Each layer has to dry. But with ceramic mold and aluminum mold, you don't have that. So it's faster the process. So this is the only difference that we see of modern investment casting and traditional method. And of course, it can be done with very simple tools. The craftsmen always use simple tools. They make their tools themselves. So this is what, and to conclude, I will add only, next please, only one thing. I think this is a correct platform that we raise this question. When it comes to artifacts, we always recognize it as antiquity for copper, iron. But the technology itself, the lost wax technology itself, should also be addressed as our integral part of our heritage, and it requires some sort of recognition. I hope you all will agree with me. With that, I will end. Thank you.
That was a wonderful session, and your deep insights into have not only enriched our understandings but also have sparked meaningful discussions. The dedication and expertise you bring into the field of archaeology are truly commendable. We are grateful for the time and the efforts you have shared with us today, ma'am. And now it's time for lunch. You can have a lunch at the hostel mess just like yesterday. Our volunteers are on the way to guide you. And please return back to the auditorium by 1:15, and we will be having the panel discussions further. Thank you.